main takeaway from the panel is that both European Parliament, European Commission, EBA are open for further discussion, open for potential small amendments required. And also they are already aware of some of the potential concerns that were raised yesterday in the steering committee and in the Label committee, where we had a discussion about the directive and where we asked for the input from the various countries. The main concerns yesterday, or potential concerns, for some countries that were raised was one, and that was the key one, was the Article 6, the scope of assets, where some said it needs to be very restrictive and very tight to protect the cover bonds, the traditional cover bonds. And others said, yeah, but on the other hand, we want a broader scope. And then even though that separate with the tiering of the, let's say, premium cover bonds, ordinary cover bonds, to have that tiering, to have the scope related to that. On the one hand, a narrow scope for premium cover bonds and a more wider scope for ordinary ones. So that's one of the points where there's slightly different views, but at least a bit more clarity needed, a bit more discussion. The other point was derivatives, where issuers, and especially those that issue that have a different currency than euros for their assets, they want to use them to mitigate risk and hedge FX risk. And it's let's say, using derivatives in the right way to reduce risk. And that's what the European Commission and Parliament confirmed is the aim, to not limit that. And that was a bit of a concern, so I think that should be fine, that's clarified. The other one where there's potential concern was the treatment of extendable maturities. It could be soft bullet or potential longer extendable maturities, where people say, well, this is accepted in the global market. It nothing to do with quality. So also in terms of risk weight, there should not be a different treatment, especially if the discretion of the issuer to extend or not is completely objective. So let's say can only happen if there's event of default of the issuer, and that's where there's still some ongoing discussion. So I think those were the main points that were concerns being discussed, and at least the points have been made and will be further discussed in the panels today and tomorrow. So I think it's a good effort and a good result to having been communicated message to European Parliament, European Commission and the EBA, which we'll all hear.
From the discussion today, I understand that there is general support for the Commission's proposal for the new directive on covered bonds. This is also very much welcomed by the EBA, and we are particularly pleased that this proposal builds on our work and on our recommendations on how to take forward the harmonization of the covered bonds in Europe. From also what I understand, there are some key open issues, particularly related to Article 6, and if we should have just one class of covered bonds or eventually two. Of course, this is from the prudential perspective. It's important that the consistency of the prudential framework is ensured on one side. On the other side, that the framework for covered bonds is built a way that it does not cause any disruption of existing covered bond markets in different member states, while we are all aiming for strengthening the EU-wide covered bond market. From the perspective of the EBA and competent authorities which are around our table, what is very important, there is a clear distinction between covered bonds and the label for covered bonds and other type of products like European secured notes. So we, in the published report, we are making it clear that these are two separate products, and that this prudential treatment and features of each instrument, while there are similarities, they are also different when it comes to underlying assets and their quality. So that's another message I also got from the discussion, that there is more work needed on European secured notes, and in particular when it comes to the infrastructure bonds.
The main point now is with the harmonization of the covered bonds, that we really make clear what the difference between the systems is, and especially to make clear what the difference between the senior preferred and the ESN is in comparison to the covered bond.
My main message was about the European secured notes possibility. I just completed a study on behalf of Commission on that, looking at what the possibilities are for this to start to become relevant. Obviously, covered bonds will always be a better instrument. Covered bonds will be more collateral efficient, more attractive to investors, and there's an abundance of assets. So what is the case for ESNs? I think there are some countries and some individual issues within countries where there are perhaps not enough mortgage assets, where the mortgage assets are flawed, or in some countries, sadly, even where the covered bond market isn't good enough for the purposes of some issuers. So I think we need to develop a framework for that. There's also a possibility of too much exposure to the mortgage market. With house prices what they are, some people are concerned about a possible downturn and not enough residential mortgage assets. And perhaps emergency liquidity needs to come from various new instruments other than mortgage-backed covered bonds. So I think there is definitely a case. It's a matter of putting in place legislation before it is needed and working out what the fine details of that are. And the EBA report and my report and the discussions with Commission hopefully are going to address that.